In late November of 1980, on a farm outside Duncan, British Columbia, a mother and father found a note left behind by their 32-year-old son. It was written in his own hand, calm and matter-of-fact, the way he wrote everything. It said he was leaving. It said he'd be gone for 42 months. And it said he was traveling aboard an alien spaceship. He was never seen again. To understand what happened that night, you have to understand who Granger Taylor was. Because the easy explanations, they fall apart the moment you look at his life. Granger Taylor was born in 1948 and grew up on his family's farm in Duncan, a small logging town on Vancouver Island, surrounded by cedar forest and mountains that hold the clouds most of the year. He dropped out of school in the 8th grade. By any academic measure, he was finished. But Granger had a kind of intelligence that doesn't show up on report cards. At 14, he found the wreck of an old bulldozer and rebuilt it, by hand, until it ran. As a young man, he hauled a derelict steam locomotive out of the brush, restored it piece by piece, and got it working. It later went to a museum. Then, he did something almost nobody believed possible. He took the remains of a Second World War fighter plane, AP-40 Kitty Hawk, and rebuilt it so faithfully that a collector paid him $20,000 for it. A grade 8 dropout on a farm in Duncan had resurrected a warplane. People who knew him described the same man. Quiet, gentle, a heavy-set figure in work clothes with grease on his hands, happiest in the shop behind his parents' farmhouse, surrounded by engines and parts. Machines made sense to Granger Taylor. He could look at anything mechanical and understand how it worked. And that, according to the people closest to him, is exactly where the trouble started. Sometime in the late 1970s, Granger became fixated on a machine he couldn't figure out, the flying saucer. He read everything he could find about UFOs. He filled his conversations with questions about propulsion, about how a craft like that could possibly generate lift and thrust. Friends recalled that it genuinely frustrated him. Every engine he'd ever met surrendered its secrets. This one wouldn't. So he built his own. Behind the farmhouse, out among the fir trees, Granger constructed a full-size flying saucer out of 2 satellite dishes welded rim to rim. He fitted it with a door, a couch, a television, and a small wood stove. It wasn't meant to fly. It was something else, a place to sit inside the problem. Friends said he'd spend hours out there, sometimes whole nights, sleeping inside the saucer in the dark of the forest. Then, according to those same friends, Granger said the dreams began. He told his close friend Robert Keller, who worked alongside him in the shop, that he was receiving mental communications from extraterrestrials. He described asking them, in his mind, how their ships were powered. He said they were answering, and at some point, according to Granger's own account, the communications changed from answers into an invitation. His friends and family didn't know what to make of it. Some of them later acknowledged that Granger had been experimenting with drugs in that period, and that maybe played a part. Others pointed out that, in every other respect, he remained the same person. Steady, practical, still fixing machines, still eating dinner at the same local grill. Whatever was happening inside Granger Taylor, it didn't look like a man falling apart. It looked like a man making plans. The night of November 29, 1980, one of the worst storms in years came down on Vancouver Island. Rain hammered the Cowichan Valley. Winds tore branches from the cedars and knocked out power across Duncan. Houses went dark. It was, by every account, a miserable night to be outside. That evening, Granger was seen at Bob's Grill in Duncan, the restaurant where he often ate. He was there and then he was gone. He drove off into the storm in his pickup truck, and neither Granger Taylor nor his truck was ever seen again. At the farmhouse, his parents found the note. It was addressed to them, and in it, Granger wrote that he'd gone away to walk aboard an alien spaceship. He said recurring dreams had assured him of a 42-month interstellar voyage to explore the vast universe, and that he'd then return. He wrote that he was leaving all his possessions to them, because he'd no longer need any. On the back of the note, he'd written his will, asking that his estate be used to help settle things while he was gone. Read that again. He left a will, the act of a man who knows he may not come back. And in the same breath, he promised a return date. 42 months. Whatever Granger believed was about to happen to him, he'd done the math on it. The search began in the days that followed. Police and family looked for the truck on the logging roads that thread through the mountains around Duncan, roads Granger knew well. The storm had washed the island clean. There were no confirmed sightings, no truck abandoned at a trailhead, no body. A grown man and a full-size pickup had gone into the storm and simply failed to come out the other side. His family didn't give up. His mother held on to the note and to the date buried inside it. 42 months from the end of November 1980 lands in the spring of 1984. Those who knew the family have said they watched that spring come. The saucer still sat behind the farmhouse in the trees, the wood stove cold, the couch empty. Spring of 1984 came and went. Granger didn't return. And then, in March of 1986, the case took its strangest turn. Workers on Mount Prevost, the mountain that rises just northwest of Duncan, came across the remains of an old explosion at a site where dynamite blasting had been done years earlier. Scattered in the debris, they found bone fragments. Reports from the time also describe pieces of metal wreckage at the site, which some accounts have linked to Granger's missing truck. Here was a possible answer, and a grim one. Granger's family kept dynamite on the farm, as many rural families did, for clearing stumps. Investigators came to believe that on the night of the storm, Granger may be driven up Mount Prevost with that dynamite, and that the blast site was where his journey actually ended. On paper, it closes the case. A troubled, brilliant man, convinced he was leaving Earth, making sure of it in the only way available to him. But the details wouldn't sit still. The bone fragments found on Mount Prevost were reported to be human, but according to the accounts of the case, they were never conclusively identified as Granger Taylor. This was 1,986 years before DNA identification became routine, and the fragments were small. The site itself had been a blasting area before, which raised its own questions about what belonged to which explosion. Some of those close to the case accepted the explanation. Others, including people in Granger's own circle, never fully did. Because there were things the dynamite theory struggled to explain. If Granger meant to end his life that night, why write a note promising to come back in 42 months, with a specificity that reads more like a flight plan than a farewell? Why tell his friend Robert Keller in the weeks beforehand about an invitation, about a voyage, in the same even tone he used to talk about camshafts and rivets? People who knew Granger have said, he wasn't a liar and wasn't a dramatist. Whatever he wrote in that note, they believed he believed it. And there's the question nobody's ever answered. If the blast on Mount Prevost happened on the night of November 29, 1980, on a mountain directly above a small town, in a valley where sound carries, how did it go unnoticed for more than 5 years? The storm is one possible answer. The wind and the rain that night were loud enough to swallow almost anything. Almost. Duncan never quite let go of Granger Taylor. The saucer stood behind the farmhouse for years, rusting among the firs, a homemade monument to a question. Filmmakers and writers have gone back to the case again and again, and every one of them runs into the same wall. The man at the center of it wasn't a drifter or a fantasist. He was a mechanical prodigy who solved every problem he ever touched, except one. And when that one problem consumed him, he wrote his parents a note, walked into the worst storm in years, and vanished so completely that even the evidence of his death remains, to this day, unconfirmed. Maybe the answer is the sad and human one. A gifted mind coming apart quietly. A mountain. A stormy night. Maybe the fragments on Mount Prevost are exactly what investigators believed they were. Or maybe Granger Taylor is the only person who ever knew what really left Duncan that night. The porch light of the Taylor farm looked out on the same dark trees for years afterward. 42 months came and went a long time ago. He never came back, and no one's ever proven what he went to meet.